Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Tyler Rickenbach, and thank you for joining me on another episode of Whiskey Throttle Podcast with Ankuur. So, today we're going to jump into one of our favorite film emulation plugins that we use in DaVinci Resolve. Now, if you are looking for that coveted film look that everyone's trying to emulate, you really have two options, right? You can either legitimately film or shoot in film, or you can try to emulate it with plugins. Now, the cost of film is certainly large. I love film and I shoot with film, but for video purposes, I have found that using Dehancer Pro is a great way to get you as close as you possibly can to that film look. Without further ado, let's dive into it and let me show you how we use it. It is a node-based system, and you can think of them kind of as layers, right? So what I typically do, and I have my keyboard set up for Final Cut Pro just because that's what I'm familiar with. So I'm going to hit Option S, and it's going to make a bunch of notes. And I do this every single time so that the process is always the same. So the first node is going to be my curves, and I'm going to take this and adjust it to the right just to get a decent exposure. And you can see that right here is shot on Canon RAW, and if you click on this on the far left, it gives you the camera raw options. Now you can, if you want to, individually go in and using decode, using it, you can select clip and you can adjust the color temperature that way. For whatever reason, Resolve does this crazy thing where it just jacks up the sharpness. I'm not sure why it does that, so I will drop that down to 0. I'm going to make basic adjustments using the camera raw. I'm going to jump back into the curves and I'm going to make some basic adjustments here. Boost the highlights, give a little bit more pop in the sky. And then my second layer is going to be the primary color bars. Now I am going to I'm going to boost the shadows a little bit. The gamma is the midtones, and then the gain happens to be adjusting the highlights. So, okay, so that's my second node. And if you hit Command D, you can toggle it off and on, and you can see what it's doing, what it's not doing. And then the same with the curves. Huge difference there. Okay, so my third node is going to typically be a window of some sort. In this case, there's already kind of a natural vignette because I shot it at such a shallow depth of field. So really, I'm going to take and apply a radial blur. And I love this because it does kind of blur the edges right here, so to speak, and it kind of just softens it, gives it a unique look. And you can start to see it right there. And you can also see that there's a ton of noise on my face. I think this was shot at like 3200 ISO. So we're going to clean that up and I'll show you how I do that. So going into the next one, I'm going to use a qualifier. And with this qualifier, there's this little eyedropper right here. And then you go to the Rubik's Cube looking block and go to Matte Finesse. And you're going to take the denoise all the way to 100. And then you can select the sky. And the reason I do that is because if you don't use the denoise, it gets kind of grady and it looks artificial. So you crank that all the way to the right, denoise it, and so that it just looks as clean as possible when you're editing. So again, if you can deselect it and you can select really what you want. And that's one of the things I love most about the qualifier. Now, you're probably wondering, well, why are you showing me this whole color grading system or process and how you do it? Well, because Dehancer is the last thing that I actually use, because everything up until that point should support what Dehancer is doing, and I'll show you that in a second. So I don't know if I really need 7 layers on this one. I'm just going to delete that because the next layer I'm going to apply or node is going to be my noise reduction. So I'm going to take that, throw it onto here, and I'm going to take the frames either side. I'm going to go down to 5, the temporal noise reduction. I'm going to change that to better. And then the motion range, I'm going to change that to large. Temporal threshold, I usually do around between 12 and 14. There was a lot of noise with this one. You can start to see that it's already cleaning up quite nicely. And then the last thing I'll go to is spatial noise reduction. I'll change this to enhanced, the radius large, and you can see full screen. Look how much that changes, right? It really does clean up. It gets rid of that and it looks really nice. Okay, so last but not least, let's go to Film Emulation Dehancer Pro. The first thing that you're going to notice is that it has input, meaning that This is like your color space, right? So the color science that we use is DaVinci Resolve, Y RGB color managed. And then if you look at the color processing mode, it's HDR DaVinci wide gamut intermediate. And the reason we do that is because, let's say, for example, like a SL3S, right? This was shot in L log. And the reason we use like this DaVinci wide gamut is because when we do that, it allows us, the creators, the editors, to tell Resolve how this footage should be processed and how it was shot. So if we select this, the clips, and we right click and we go down to input color space, and we can go over to like a log, and then it will automatically convert it to Rec 709. So you're not having to apply LUTs. It goes directly to what it should be. And if you're shooting raw, then you don't need to make any corrections. With the 1DX, it was shot in C log, so the same thing. I'm going to take it. Actually, this was shot in Canon RAW, so you don't need to adjust it. The only thing I needed to change was the Leica SL3S. Again, if you right click, you'll see this tab that says input color space. You can change it, L log, and then it will convert it automatically to Rec 709 so that you know you're working in the proper color space. So jumping back to the color tab, you can see now that the input is Rec 709, which we don't want, right? This is basically telling you, okay, what color space are you working with and what color space is your project set up into DaVinci Resolve. If you go scroll down, DaVinci Resolve, wide gamut, intermediate, that's what we're working with. So we're going to click it so that it interprets the colors properly. Okay, so now that the source has been identified, you do have controls here to adjust the exposure, temperature, color tint, difference, and so forth. So when you download the latest Dehancer, it will give you film emulations that you can use. And there's over like 70 of them that you can choose from. I've kind of narrowed it down to like my favorite 5. I really love Kodak Ektachrome E100 2010. It does have like kind of this rich magenta to it, so sometimes I will knock it down if it does seem like a lot, which there is. I also love, I don't know how we even say this, Grozicki 1906 Experiment, which is probably what I'll use on this one, or the Rollei CN 200. Also kind of a flatter but muted look, which I do like. So these are all film emulations or film stocks that are actually used in today's cinema world. So it really comes down to personal preference. What do you like and what vibe or feeling are you trying to create? So with this, I'm going to select Ultramax. I do like Ultramax 400, and what's cool about Dehancer is that it gives you the option to push and pull, and you can see that when you do that, it does change how it looks. Notice down here that the vector graph, this is going to really skew your vector scope, so to speak. And because if you don't have it, you can see, look how much this changes down here. So this is something to be aware of when you are using this Dehancer, that it is going to work with your image, and you have to just you apply it kind of slowly, because if you don't, then it will and can break your image. Okay, so you can see that there is a lot of grain. You take that off, Command D, deselect it, and then you can see, whoa, there's a ton of grain here. What's awesome about the latest Dehancer update is that it now gives you the ability to adjust how much grain you actually want to show. So I like, personal preference here, 65 millimeter, 50, just because it's a finer grain and it's not so gritty. So you can see compared to like 35 millimeter, so that's with 65. If you go to 8, I mean, that's just bonkers. There's a time and place for that. It's not the time and place for this. Personal preference again. So this is cool because it just gives you the option to actually control how much grain that you're seeing. I like 65, ISO 50. It's nice and subtle, but it's still there. So, and then you can add halation. 65 again is what my personal preference is. You enable it, and then bloom and enabled. So that is the end color grade, so to speak. There's a difference there. It does soften the highlights, gives you that bloom. You're not gonna see a ton of halation in this just because of how it's shot, but I do like how that looks. And then there's a plethora of other options that you can use down here. I don't really go into all of this as much just because those first, um, these film grain, halation, and bloom are really what I use. One thing I did forget to mention is that if you go to the print, so once you have selected your film, I will typically go down to the print where it says profile. And I have found that the Kodak Endura glossy paper usually has like the most texture. And you can, again, this all comes down to personal preference of what you like. But if you do use the Kodak Endura glossy, you can see how much that changes and how much contrast it's giving you. You have to adjust accordingly if that's the print profile that you want to use. I'm kind of liking linear more on this, and then I'm just going to go back and adjust the blacks so that they're a little bit richer, and the whites so they're not crushing. Okay. So with it, without it, with it, without it. Probably one thing that I would do now that I've looked at that. Oh, so with, without, with, without. Okay. So I don't like how much contrast is in my face. I'm going to adjust this. And probably one thing that I'll do right here is I'm going to add a qualifier. Again, going back to the eyedropper Rubik's Cube looking box, select the denoise, and then just adjust my face because it does need a little bit of color. I feel like it's okay. So there we go. That's the first clip, right? Now let's just drop another clip for fun onto the timeline when we're up in the air. There we go. Beautiful shots of flying over the clouds, which this is like literally right over the Grand Prismatic Spring. However, we were clouded out, so we didn't see a thing. So let's just see how well this copy and paste over to this. Holy cow, that's not going to work. Okay, so we're going to make some adjustments here, reset these nodes, and we'll start to bring this back to normal. Okay, cool. Don't need to make too much crazy adjustments here. Just the curves were a little off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to qualify the sky. And I'm going to bring in some blue there, some contrast. Okay. And I don't need that one. So this is, I think, where we are really going to see what the film does. So let's just jump down to, you can see now that that really affects the look of it if you change the film stock or the film type. I personally, I love, again, going back to Ektachrome E100. That's way too much, just how it looks. So you can push and pull it, which does give you the option to really change the overall like brightness, saturation from your highlights to your shadows. If you are using this plugin, I would recommend just taking some time and going through and making a list of like, okay, I really like these film stocks. You know, if you look at Fujifilm Velvia 50, it is very rich, but there's a lot of magenta. So if you like that look, but you don't want so much magenta, you adjust the tint. You can either do that on the primary balance node, which I do sometimes, or you can use the Dehancer plugin itself and adjust the tint. Either way, there are several options and different ways to get the look that you're going for. The reason why I put Dehancer at the very end or make it the last node is because all of these nodes should complement the Dehancer plugin. And I would do this if I was using a LUT. Let's say, for example, we'll make one more and then I'll deselect that. If I were to use what's in Resolve, the basic, what is it called? The film look creator, this would be the last thing that I would use as well. It wouldn't be the first thing because all of your primary edits, all your heavy lifting should be done first. And then the LUT, so to speak, is the last thing that you apply to it. I personally think that Dehancer gives you more options and more flexibility, which is why I personally like it. And what's so great is that you only pay for it once, or then you get the updates for life. Here we got Chris. He's up in the plane looking back at me, and I'm going to apply it. Obviously, that look is not going to work. We can just start to adjust. I'm going to just increase the temperature on this, bring in some of that warmth from the morning sun, and I'm going to bring in the shadows. So that's actually looking really good. I like that. I think I'm going to jump down to the Exochrome E100. That is a very rich file. I love how that looks, and that's probably what I'd go with, honestly. The one thing I would change, so I do like that its qualifier is grabbing Chris's face and it's allowing me to light that up. And then I would take this one and just grab the sky and adjust it just to bring that down. You can see how much shadow that I'm able to get back, which is awesome. And now you have a pretty clean, like, that to me looks almost like a finished shot. I love how that looks. The only thing I probably would do is go back to the curves. I would bring the shadows up a little bit. But you can see now, you can see how the halation is right here in the bloom. Like, I love that look. So overall, I'm super stoked with how this is looking. All the heavy lifting should be done at the very beginning in all of like your primary nodes. And then when you use plugins like Dehancer or other film emulation softwares, apply it at the end as the cherry on top. If you are looking for a film emulation to carry in your pocket, I would recommend checking out Dehancer's app as well, because they're going to give you the same 86 or so film emulations that you have in Dehancer, but also now you can have them in the back of your pocket. Thank you again for joining us on the Whiskey Throttle Podcast. Till next time, we'll see you later.